Kaya, Wanju Noongar Wardandi Buja, Noongar Kora Yining, Nijabal Wakamil Jinini, Nyala Maya Win Murich, Dapukan Murt, Dapukan Nyan Buja, Nija Noongara Kalagap, Nyalakat Nija, Nyala Buja, Nyala Mort, Nyala Maya. Hello, welcome to Noongar Wardandi land. Noongars have been here for a long time. The rainbow serpent has been watching this place for a long time. This place is for healing. We must walk steady on this land. This is Noongar country, all of us together here. This is our land, our family, our voice.
Early explorers Thomas Turner from Augusta and surveyor A.C. Gregory traversed the lower and upper reaches of the Blackwood River, whilst the section that contained Bridgetown remained unexplored for several years. It is suggested that escaped convicts from King George Sound may have passed through the area and crossed the Blackwood downstream of Marriott Ford while attempting to get to Bass.
The Muirs came to the Warren region from their parents' Forest Hill property about 40 kilometres north of Albany. Thomas and John Muir, later joined by their brother Andrew, explored the eastern part of the region and took up land at Perup, Lake Muir and Deeside. They had started building slab huts by 1856 and obtained pastoral leases in 1859. The Muir family had good relations with some of the Aborigines, and it has been said the Aborigines were employed to help clear the track from Deeside to Forest Hill. This later became the Muir Highway.
From necessity, the pioneers first used building materials that were locally available. Settlers made slabs for building their shelters using timber cut on site. Those who settled near streams through clay gullies manufactured bricks for their buildings. Timber, reeds and bark remained the main roofing materials until iron became available in the 1890s.
John Bletchton and Edward G. Hester selected land on the Blackwood between Balingup and the Warren. It seems that Hester and Bletchton both converged on the Blackwood River country in 1857, the attraction for both men being pasture with the absence of poison bush. Bletchington, born in Beverley, was guided by Aborigines from there, travelling across the plateau of the Darling Range to the Blackwood River. Bletchington's homestead, Bridgetown, was built by Joseph Smith, a ticket of leave man who went on to become a well-respected and prominent citizen of Bridgetown. Joseph Smith was instrumental in the development of the region and was responsible for the construction of many early local buildings, often utilising convict labour. He first arrived in the region to work on the first two bridges over the Blackwood, but also built a number of the first homesteads.
There are different versions of how Edward Hester selected his land. One being that he was also guarded by Aborigines, the other that he saw the land during his policing duties. It has been said that much good-natured rivalry existed between the two families as to who was the original settler at the Blackwood. But because of distance and thick vegetation, each did not know of each other's existence until some months had passed. The Hester's family homestead was Blackwood Park.
John Olner arrived in the Bridgetown area in 1862. He settled some distance southwest of the Blackwood Bridge. His homestead, Nelson Grange, was also built by ex-convict foreman Joseph Smith and his crew. The fruit industry around the Blackwood district was initiated by John Olner. After trying to grow fruit in other places in the southwest of the colony, he took up land in this area in 1862. He immediately started clearing and planting an orchard at the Grange. The first apple trees of Hawthornden variety, procured from Sydney, were planted in 1862. Olner is reputed to have been sending his apples to the Bunbury market by 1877. His contagious enthusiasm and drive encouraged others in the area to diversify and to grow fruit trees.
The first settlers were graziers, but as time progressed, the timber of the southwest was recognised as an export commodity. The need for transport facilities for the timber ensured that the initial development of the industry was in the coastal area.
Pit sawing became a popular way of cutting up logs. The quality of the sawn timber was surprisingly good, and more accurately, sized timber could be produced.
T. Campbell Carey has left it on record that in 1868, many of the settlers were anxious that a few small lots should be set out on the Gazettal town site in order to induce the 4 tradesmen already in town, a carpenter, blacksmith, wheelwright and shoemaker, to settle and encourage others to follow. Because of the difficulties with the terrain to the east and west of Bletchenden's property, the area preferred was to the north along both sides of the Gazettal Brook. At the time, it was suggested that the future town would only be a mere country village and that half a dozen blocks would suffice for now. Surveyor Thomas Carey worked on this project with the assistance of a young John Forrest. On the 4th of May 1868, he sent a sketch with his recommendations for the town boundaries to the Surveyor General, Captain Rowe. The plan included John Bletchenden's house site, Nelson, location 12, and Farm Nelson, location 25. He initially recommended the name Gazettal for the town, as this was a local Aboriginal name and had been adopted since white settlement. Some townsfolk decided it would be preferable to name the town Bridgetown after William Padbury's bark that transported the first wool clip from the Blackwood area. The centre of the new bridge across the Blackwood River was the point from which the new town site was surveyed. On the 9th of June 1868, Bridgetown was gazetted as a town. It was the 19th town to be gazetted in the state after the foundation of Perth in 1829.
The setting up of various public services around the Blackwood settlement at the time creates the impression that the government of the day recognised the importance and potential of this district for pioneer settlement.
John May arrived in 1872 and at that time reported that there were 7 buildings, including the police station, a general store, a small hotel building, Bletchenden's house, Joseph Smith's house, and 2 others.
Very early in the white settlement days, it was acknowledged that access across the river was essential to the development of the region. There have been 5 bridges and 2 rail bridges constructed at Bridgetown. Austin's Ford was adjacent to the entry of Gazettal Brook into the river. Negotiating this crossing was extremely difficult for heavily laden bullock wagons. The settlers first petitioned the government for a bridge in 1861. Unfortunately, the first bridge was never used. Flood swept the structure away just as it was nearing completion. A second temporary bridge was built in 1862, upstream from Bletchenden's farmhouse at Bridgetown, where Hampton Street meets with the Blackwood River. Joseph Smith was the foreman for the bridge and convict labour was utilised. This structure served the community until 1888, when a more substantial third bridge was built.
The third bridge was built by contract in 1888 for £907. The second bridge remained for a while as a footbridge until it became unsafe and local residents removed it by setting fire to it. None of the timber for bridges 2 and 3 was milled. It was all pit sawn or hewn, and all the iron bolts were made on the site.
The railway came to Bridgetown in 1898, and within a few years it was decided to extend the line to the Wilgarup River. Realignment of the Southwest Highway by the Main Roads Department in 1936 coincided with the building of a 4th traffic bridge, which is built west, downstream, from Bletchenden's Bridgetown for £5,000. The bridge was widened more than 30 years later to 6.9 metres to cope with the ever-increasing traffic. The 5th bridge was constructed in 1981 and is in still use today.
The early farmers relied heavily on their horses for working in the fields, gathering and droving their stock, transporting their produce and supplies, as well as for personal conveyance. Chaff cutting for horse feed was prevalent and much for the hay produced was converted to chaff for horse fodder. Recommendations of the Agricultural Board by 1897 were that the Nelson is a good district for stock, and it would be a much better one if there were fewer trees, or ring barking were more largely practiced. The country is too much shaded. If more land could be cleared and laid down with grass, which the climate makes it mildly adapted for, where one beast is now kept to pastures, would support 100, and this is what the country must come to.
The chief advantages of the Nelson district were considered to be the soil, climate and rainfall. Although the first farmers in the Warren Blackwood pastoralists, they soon grew hay, oats, and wheat for their own use as well as feeding their stock. The land was also suitable for green fodders of all kinds, corn and maize. Potatoes were another successful crop. Last, but by no means least, is the importance of the fruit industry to the region. During 1870s, Bridgetown was gaining a reputation for its fruit, mainly apples at this stage, although other English fruits, such as stone fruits, were also grown for the settlers' own use and for preserving.
Because of the terrain and isolation, the cost of getting their produce to market was unreasonable, and they were letting the fruit rot on the ground.
Moves were made to extend the railway through to Bridgetown, and a significant factor positively influencing the proposition was the rapid growth of the goldfields at that time, and the need of the population there for fresh produce and timber. Completion of a rail line through Bridgetown meant that the produce and timber could go all the way through to the goldfields with minimum handling. Because of Lord John Forrest's connection with the district, he was an advocate for its implementation. Mr. Alexander Forrest was also a supporter of the bill. The Forrest government, together with the local agricultural society, agitated to extend the railway line to Bridgetown in spite of opposition due to the lack of the population, the limited amount of land under crop, and the fact that there was much land nearer Perth that was still open for selection. The arrival of the railway in late 1898 was the turning point of Bridgetown's development as a significant rural town. It was not only used for goods carrying, but became an important part of travel, bringing visitors to the town and enabling residents to more easily access Bunbury and Perth. Train accident in West Australia. Prince's narrow escape. A most alarming accident happened to the Royal train on Monday afternoon, 10 miles from Bridgetown. The Royal car at the end of the train and the ministerial car adjoining both left the rails, ploughed along the track for 200 yards, and finally toppled over a low embankment. The rescue party from the other carriages were prepared for anything in the way of unprecedented horrors when they reached and examined the overturned cars. A feeble cry for help was heard coming from the ministerial car, but there seemed to be an ominous silence from the royal compartments. Rescuers armed with axes and any other implements that could be easily procured climbed to the top of the overturned cars, burst open the windows, and feverishly pursued the work of extrication. But to their astonishment and relief, only displays of hilarity were seen through the windows of the royal car. His Royal Highness was reclining amid the wreckage of the costly compartment, smiling and smoking a cigar. "Hurt?" he cried in response to anxious inquiries through the overhead windows. "Bless your heart, no, I'm glad to say the whiskey flask is not broken either." The prince and other occupants of the royal car were rescued through a window from the top. The prince characteristically lit a cigarette and laughingly remarked, "What a mess! This is not on the program." The derailed cars were separated from the train, which continued on to Bridgetown, the prince announcing that he intended to proceed with the full program. The royal train reached Bridgetown at 4:30 p.m., where the greeting from the populace was even more hearty because of the local knowledge of what His Royal Highness had been through.
The power was officially turned on the 7th of May 1924, and there were enough houses wired to make it worthwhile. From then on, it grew and there were more houses being wired all the time.
State Electricity Commission finally took over provision of the electricity services in 1950.
The first public school in Bridgetown was opened in Steer Street next door to the Mechanics Institute in 1870 with 7 boys and 5 girls. Miss Amy Gardner, who had begun her teaching career at the age of 14 at Gazettal, took the position of first teacher at the Bridgetown School when she was 16. In 1898, there was an announcement by Sir James Lee Steer that a new school was to be built in Rose Street, Bridgetown, but this did not eventuate until 1914, at which time the current school was opened. Some of the outlying settlers organised tutors for their own children and those of neighbours, often building a small structure to share for a schoolroom. Arrangements for small schools included a government payment of £7 per annum per pupil towards the salary of the teacher. For participating families, the parents made the salary up to £60 per annum and took turns providing lodgings for the teacher for 3 months at a time. Female teachers were required to give up their position if they married. The duties included cleaning the schoolroom and keeping the fire going in winter.
By the mid-1880s, there was a well-established and flourishing fruit and agricultural industry in the district. In January 1885, Mr. A.K. Brown, an Englishman who had recently taken up a tract of land known as the Peninsula, called an inaugural meeting in the Mechanics Institute to form an agricultural society. The response was gratifying, and in June of the same year, the Central District's Agricultural Society was formed. In 1893, the organisation was renamed the Nelson Agricultural Society. Important features of shows in those days included fruit displays and the showing of horses. In 1916, the organisation was again renamed, this time to the Bridgetown Agricultural Society, which it has been to this day.
The concept of a meeting place and hall for Bridgetown was first raised in 1876 by John Allnut and Charles Rose of Wilgarup. It came to fruition in 1877. The settlers were growing in number, and until that time public meetings had been held in the schoolrooms. Attendance had become too large to be accommodated in these premises. The people of the wider district decided to build a community meeting place in Bridgetown to be called the Mechanics Institute. The original building was paid for by the members' subscriptions on land granted by the government. The location was on the corner of Hampton and Sear Streets, Bridgetown, now the site of the Shire buildings. Mr. Joseph Smith was the builder. By 1878, the Mechanics' Institute was a focal part of the town, being used for community meetings and social events. In 1906, the building was modified due to the community's need for a larger meeting place. The new building doubled the size of the original and comprised a hall, library and reading room. With the arrival of cinema, the hall was regularly used as a picture theatre.
The current two-storey Shire building was designed by architect Mr. W. Harry Jeffreys of Albany and built by Messrs. W. and W. C. Moyes. It included a town hall complete with projection box, which fulfilled the community needed for a cinema, meeting place and venue for socialising. Roof timbers from the 1906 renovation of the original venue were reused in the new building. The official opening was in 1936.
Please welcome Mary Myfanwy performing her song Finding Forever while we have a look at things that bring us together as a community in remembrance, in camaraderie, in celebration.
your town. I like the way you live. I like the dry wit in your watering hole. I like your dusty roads and hidden farms, and your hills, they feel like open arms. Never thought I'd find a place to fill that role. So spare some good grace for a fugitive soul.
If you wanna know why I don't come from around here, dead end roads I've walked on led somewhere, but I've never had a gravestone to honor. If it took roots to survive, I'd be a goner. I've been a nomad, an outcast, and a stray, but I feel no need to go walk about today. I like your town, I like the way you live. I like the dry wit in your watering hole. I like your dusty roads and hidden farms, and your hills, they feel like open arms. Never thought I'd find a place to fill that role. So spare some good grace for a fugitive soul. Tell yourself it's freedom as you're leaving. Eventually you'll end up disbelieving. Call me a nomad, an outcast, or a stray, but I feel no need to go walk about today. I like your town, I like the way you live. I like the dry wit in your watering hole. I like your dusty roads and hidden farms, and your hills, they feel like open arms. Never thought I'd find a place to fill that role. So spare some good grace for a fugitive soul. Never thought I'd find somewhere to fill that role. Won't you buy another beer for a fugitive soul? Go on and buy another beer for a fugitive soul.
Won't you take me out of here? Tell a friend to see that I'll be waiting right here. Throw me down to those rolling waves. And I wrote that song for the beautiful Blackwood River that runs through this town. Thank you.